Have you ever noticed how control slithers into the quiet corners of our lives? Not just the obvious places, the loud, overbearing dictators, the manipulative bosses, but in subtle, shadowy ways that creep along the edges of your daily existence. There's a reason so many of history's tragedies and personal heartbreaks, so many of our silent wars, have had nothing to do with strategy or ideas or right and wrong. Control, deep, primal, nearly invisible, is the real force most people are chasing. And it is far more twisted than most of us dare to admit. That's what we're exploring today. The hidden addiction to control and how it infects our relationships, our sense of self, and even the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. Everyone talks about wanting freedom. Yet the truth is, far more people are obsessed with control, controlling their fate, their image, their partners, their friends, their children, sometimes even the whole world. But it's not just about being in charge. No, deep down, it's about staving off terror. The terror that if you don't grip tightly enough, everything worth having might just slip away. So what is the hidden psychological problem? We like to believe we're rational actors. But the drive to control isn't rational. It's a compulsion. Most of us spend our lives building invisible fences, over people, over outcomes, even over our own emotions. Control becomes an anesthesia for uncertainty, a painkiller for powerlessness. It whispers, if you just orchestrate everything perfectly, nothing bad will happen. You'll be safe. But the craving never stops. Control is always slightly out of reach. That's why the more you grasp for it, the more hollow you feel. Your life turns into a chess game where you're playing both sides, always calculating, always tightening the boundaries. Parents hover over children until they suffocate. Lovers monitor each other's texts, filter their own feelings, carefully edit every word. The more insecure we feel inside, the more we try to hijack the narrative. Control is a mask for fear. It's armor for shame. Why do people fall into the trap of control again and again? Because uncertainty is a type of pain. The mind can't stand it. Your brain, wired for survival, doesn't measure happiness, it measures threats. Every unpredictable detail becomes a potential betrayal. The boss who micromanages every email, the partner who quietly tracks your movements, not out of cruelty, but out of a deep, gnawing anxiety. If you strip away their power, you expose their vulnerability. And that is intolerable. This desperation runs deeper than most want to face. Sometimes it's the child who grew up amid chaos, vowing never to feel helpless again. Sometimes it's the person who equates letting go with being irrelevant, invisible, forgotten. To them, surrender feels like annihilation. So they double down on rules, on routines, on the illusion of predictability. Anything less feels like death by 1,000 cuts, tiny losses of self they cannot abide. But here's the twist. The tighter you grip for control, the more it slips through your fingers. The partner you're trying to mold secretly resents you, or quietly drifts away. The team you dominate starts to hide their mistakes, sabotage each other, or plot your downfall. Control breeds distrust, and distrust demands more control. It's a vicious spiral that turns relationships toxic and people into strangers to themselves. What does this reveal about human nature? Control isn't inherently evil. After all, some self-mastery is necessary for growth. But the dark truth is, at its core, control is about one thing: fear. And fear unchecked becomes a monster that devours everything it touches. Human beings, when threatened, regress to the oldest software in the brain. Fight, freeze, flee, or dominate. When you're scared, your mind reaches for power, over anything it can reach, to avoid feeling powerless. Especially over people. This is why so many seemingly wise or compassionate people turn cruel when they're threatened. Power is simply fear in armor. And sometimes, the largest tyrants are the most terrified children, just hiding in adult shells, clutching the controls of their world with white-knuckled obsession. The tragedy is that they're not fighting outside enemies. They're fighting their own ghosts, lost moments when they felt small, unseen, or ignored. There's another uncomfortable layer beneath all this. Control isn't just about others. The most common battleground is you, your own mind, your own desires, your own body. The urge to control seeps inward. You compulsively edit your thoughts, punish your flaws, set impossible standards. You convince yourself that if you can just master every impulse, silence every doubt, exorcise every weakness, finally you'll deserve love, or at least peace. But you never do. The inner tyrant is insatiable. Here's where self-deception comes in. People will swear they just want the best for their partner, their children, their team. But behind every noble motive, there's often a shadow motive, the terror of being irrelevant, unloved, or abandoned if they lose their grip. We build narratives, stories that rationalize our need to control as virtues. I'm just protective. It's for their own good. Someone needs to be responsible. But protection can become a prison. Responsibility can become domination masquerading as care. Now, let's go even deeper. What if the craving for control is not just a flaw, but a refuge from something even darker? Think about it. To surrender control is to admit that you are vulnerable to chaos and to other people. And other people are unpredictable, dangerous, capable of betraying you, abandoning you, even destroying you. There's a reason so much of history is soaked in battles for dominance. To be without control is to admit that at any moment, your world could collapse, and you could be powerless to stop it. That's a level of existential terror most people cannot face. So instead, we build castles out of routines, walls out of expectations, moats out of suspicion. We develop rituals, not just to shape the world, but to convince ourselves we are safe. Some people live entire lives this way, never realizing their pursuit of control has become their own invisible cage. Intimacy becomes impossible because true intimacy requires uncertainty, risk, and trust in someone other than yourself. What happens if you dare put down the shield? Almost nobody does. The fear is too great. Our modern world, with its deadlines, distractions, and demands, feeds this anxiety. Everything must be optimized, measured, tracked, predicted. Ambition is just another word for control. Perfectionism is its most elegant disguise. And on social media, everyone is curating not just their image, but the narrative of their entire existence. Real feeling is filtered out. But here's the rawest truth of all. The only real control comes when you embrace the lack of it. When you accept that you are not the author of anyone else's life, not even fully your own. When you recognize that the craving for control is just a frightened child, begging not to be hurt. Freedom doesn't come from dictating the story. It comes from letting yourself be surprised, sometimes hurt, by it. The irony is that peace shows up only after you stop chasing it. Relationships deepen not when you control the other, but when you risk being changed by them. Courage is measured not by how tightly you grip, but by how willing you are to let go. You may spend your whole life chasing the illusion of control. Most people do. But if you want something deeper, real connection, true authority over yourself, it starts by facing the terror nobody wants to name. The world cannot be controlled, only entered. The self cannot be dominated, only understood. And maybe, at the end, that's the hidden perspective. The more you need control, the less power you really have. Real strength is found, not in grasping tighter, but in letting go.